Brian Pillman's death is one of the saddest stories in wrestling. He passed away from heart failure at just 35 years old, way too young and way too suddenly. But honestly, the pain didn't start there. His life had been full of struggles long before his health started to fall apart. From tough childhood days to nonstop injuries and personal battles, it always felt like Brian was fighting something. His death was heartbreaking, but sadly, it was the tragic final chapter of a life that had been rough from the start. Brian Pillman's life was filled with struggle from the very beginning. As a baby, he was constantly in and out of hospitals. He had a rare condition that caused multiple growths, called polyps, in his throat, and doctors had to operate on him over 30 times before he even turned 3. Just imagine that. Dozens of surgeries before most kids can even speak clearly. That's actually what gave him his famously raspy voice, a sound that would stick with him for the rest of his life and later become part of his wrestling persona. But the battles didn't stop when he left the hospital. As a kid, Pillman also had a tough time in school. He struggled academically and needed tutoring just to stay eligible to play sports. Still, he pushed through because sports were his escape, his way of fighting back against everything life kept throwing at him. Eventually, he found his place in the wrestling world, where his wild energy and intense presence made him stand out. But then came another life-changing moment, a terrible single-car accident. The crash left him with badly damaged ankles. His injuries were so severe that doctors had to insert metal plates just so he could walk, let alone wrestle. He went through multiple surgeries and his mobility was never the same. But Brian wasn't ready to slow down. He rushed back into the ring, trying to keep his career alive, but doing so meant living with constant pain. And that pain led him down a dangerous path, relying heavily on painkillers just to keep going. On top of the painkillers, there were also reports of steroid use. All of this, his injuries, the pills, the pressure to perform, created a storm that was getting harder and harder for him to control. Brian's personal life wasn't any easier. He had children with more than one woman, and his family life was complicated and filled with tension. His first wife, Rochelle, went through a traumatic experience when she was the victim of a violent attack. Later, she died by suicide, something that reportedly had a deep emotional impact on Brian. Then came his relationship with Melanie, his second wife. That marriage had its own share of problems, and after Brian's sudden death, things got even messier. There were serious questions and controversies surrounding how his estate was handled, leaving behind even more heartbreak for his family and fans. He may have only lived 35 years, but Brian Pillman's impact on the world of wrestling is impossible to ignore. So let's dive in and take a closer look at the legacy he left behind, shall we? Brian Pillman's wrestling journey kicked off in November 1986 with Stampede Wrestling, Stu Hart's legendary Calgary-based promotion. Right out of the gate, Pillman teamed up with Bruce Hart, Stu's son, and together they formed a tag team called Bad Company. It's important not to confuse them with the similarly named Bad Company from the US Bad Company made a quick impact. By April 1987, they captured the Stampede International Tag Team Championship after winning a tournament final against Ron Starr and the Cuban Assassin. Their first title reign was solid, but controversy hit in October when a disputed match against Jerry Morrow and Makan Singh led to the belts being held up. Pillman and Bruce Hart reclaimed the titles in a rematch the following month and held them until July 1988, when Morrow and the Cuban Assassin finally dethroned them. During his Stampede run, Pillman used a clever strategy to get fans emotionally invested in his character. His girlfriend at the time, Trisha Hayes, posed as his sister and sat ringside. Heel wrestlers would target her to generate heat, giving Pillman the perfect excuse to come to the rescue and build sympathy from the crowd. His last night in Stampede came on August 13, 1988, when he teamed with Bruce Hart and the masked Jason the Terrible to beat the Great Gamma, Makan Singh, and Johnny Smith in the main event. With Stampede in his rearview, Pillman moved south to Memphis to work for the Continental Wrestling Association. In 1989, Pillman briefly ventured to Japan for New Japan Pro Wrestling's Battle Line Tokyo Dome tour. He squared off against stars like Masa Saito and Tatsumi Fujinami, and even teamed with Big Van Vader in a tag match. This trip added more layers to his developing in-ring style. That summer, he returned stateside and joined World Championship Wrestling, where he became known as Flyin Brian. With his quick speed, drop kicks, and aerial attacks, he stood out immediately. Pillman wasn't just fast, he was fearless. One of the first American wrestlers to mix lucha libre moves into his arsenal, he helped bring a new flavor to WCW's style. He found early success teaming with Tom Zank, aka Z-Man, and together they won the NWA United States Tag Team titles in early 1990. Though the reign didn't last long, it gave fans a glimpse of Pillman's potential. After that, he entered a quirky phase where he donned a mask and called himself the Yellow Dog. This was all part of a storyline after losing a loser leaves WCW match, a common wrestling twist. Despite the disguise, fans knew who it was, and the gimmick added to his growing reputation as a versatile performer. Between 1991 and 1992, Pillman became a cornerstone of WCW's light heavyweight division. He held the WCW Light Heavyweight Championship twice, clashing with standout names like Brad Armstrong, Jushin Thunder Liger, and Scotty Flamingo. Pillman also spent time wrestling in Japan during this period. He worked matches in Tokyo and Nagoya, teaming with American stars like Tim Horner and Z-Man against Japanese legends such as Shiro Koshinaka and Kuniaki Kobayashi. His exposure to different styles continued sharpening his in-ring craft. In late 1992, frustrated by title setbacks and changes, Pillman turned heel. He formed a short-lived but intense team with Barry Windham, aiming for the NWA and WCW tag titles. They clashed with Ricky Steamboat and Shane Douglas at Starrcade, but fell short. When Windham moved on to chase singles gold, Pillman pivoted again. That's when he teamed up with stunning Steve Austin, forming the unforgettable duo known as the Hollywood Blondes. Their chemistry was instant. In March 1993, they won the WCW and NWA Tag Team Championships from Steamboat and Douglas and became one of the most entertaining parts of WCW television. They mocked the Four Horsemen, especially Ric Flair and Arn Anderson, even spoofing Flair's talk segment with a parody called A Flair for the Old. Unfortunately, the duo's run was cut short by injury and backstage politics. Pillman hurt his leg, and Lord Steven Regal had to fill in for him during a key match where they lost the titles to Anderson and Paul Roma. After the Blondes split up in late 1993, Pillman returned to singles action as a babyface. He feuded with his former partner Austin and chased the WCW Television Championship, coming close but never quite capturing it. After a quiet spell, he returned in early 1995, almost repackaged as California Brian, a short-lived idea that didn't stick. He played up a Hollywood persona, claiming he had been filming Baywatch, and slid into a tweener role, bouncing between hero and villain depending on the night. That fall, Pillman joined forces with Arn Anderson and reignited his feud with Ric Flair. On the first ever episode of WCW Monday Nitro in September 1995, he wrestled and defeated Jushin Liger in a high-energy rematch from their Super Brawl II clash. At Halloween Havoc, Pillman and Anderson teamed up against Flair and Sting. In a twist, Flair turned on Sting mid-match, revealing he had aligned with Pillman and Anderson all along. The Four Horsemen were officially back, this time featuring Flair, Anderson, Pillman, and Chris Benoit. Around the same time, Pillman dove deep into a character transformation. Gone was the clean-cut Flyin Brian. In his place came the loose cannon, a wild, unpredictable persona that blurred the lines between fiction and reality. Dressed in leather vests, graphic t-shirts, and sunglasses, Pillman embraced chaos. Even his own horseman allies weren't sure if they could trust him. His new persona led to several real-life uncomfortable moments. During a match with Eddie Guerrero at Clash of the Champions 32, Pillman suddenly grabbed commentator Bobby Heenan, who had a history of neck issues, causing Heenan to drop an unplanned F-bomb on live TV. That moment cemented Pillman's loose cannon reputation. The chaos continued at Super Brawl VI in February 1996. He faced Kevin Sullivan in an I Respect You strap match, but broke character mid-match, grabbing the mic and saying, "I respect you, Booker man," outing Sullivan as the show's real-life booker. The moment was so shocking, WCW edited it out of replays. The next day, Eric Bischoff fired Pillman, but some say it was all part of a plan. Bischoff later claimed they orchestrated the firing to allow Pillman to go to ECW, build his wild man image further, then return to WCW hotter than ever. But that plan backfired. Pillman didn't return. Instead, he popped up in ECW in the most unpredictable way possible. At ECW CyberSlam in February 1996, Pillman hijacked an in-ring interview, cursed out Bischoff, insulted the ECW fans, and even threatened to expose himself in the ring. It was all part of the act, but the crowd wasn't sure what to believe. Security dragged him out of the building, but Pillman made sure everyone knew, whether it was WCW, ECW, or somewhere else, he wasn't just another wrestler anymore. He then officially joined the WWF on June 10, 1996. His signing was announced at a press conference, and it marked a major step in Vince McMahon's shift toward locking in talent with guaranteed contracts. WCW had already swiped away stars like Lex Luger, Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall, so Vince wasn't taking any more chances. Pillman was actually the second WWF star to sign a guaranteed deal, right after Mark Mero. At first, Pillman wasn't ready to wrestle. He was still recovering from a badly broken ankle, so instead he showed up as a commentator, staying in the spotlight while healing. But he didn't stay quiet for long. Just weeks later, on an episode of WWF Superstars in Detroit, he jumped into the action by attacking a fan who had gotten out of line, signaling that he was ready to return. Things got wild later that year. On November 4th, 1996 episode of Raw, Pillman was involved in one of the most controversial storylines in wrestling history, what's now called the Pillman's Got a Gun segment. It all started when Pillman, who had once been close friends with Steve Austin, started siding with Austin's rival, Bret Hart. Austin didn't take that lightly. On October 27th, during an interview on Superstars, Austin snapped and viciously attacked Pillman in the ring. The feud kept heating up until Austin decided to confront Pillman at his home in Kentucky. WWF cameras were already set up inside, along with interviewer Kevin Kelly, Pillman's wife Melanie, and some of Pillman's friends who were there for protection. But as the interview went on, Pillman grew more and more intense. Suddenly, he pulled out a handgun and shouted, "When Austin 316 meets Pillman, 9mm, I'm gonna blast his sorry ass straight to hell." Austin showed up and fought off Pillman's friends, forcing his way into the house. Just as he was about to reach Pillman, the gun was raised, and then the screen went black. Fans watching at home had no idea what was real or fake. Moments later, the feed returned with Pillman yelling and pointing the gun, while his friends dragged Austin out. He even cursed live on TV, yelling, "Get out of the fucking way!" The WWF ended up apologizing for the segment due to the backlash. After WrestleMania 13, Pillman officially returned to the ring and joined the Hart Foundation alongside Bret Hart, Owen Hart, British Bulldog, and Jim Neidhart, close friends from his Stampede Wrestling days. Now a heel, Pillman reignited his feud with Austin. One memorable moment from their rivalry was when Austin crushed Pillman's ankle between a chair, a move that later became known as the Pillmanizer. By May 1997, Pillman was wrestling regularly, often teaming up with the Hart Foundation. At In Your House Canadian Stampede, he took part in a 10-man tag match, helping the Hart Foundation beat Austin's team in Calgary. Later, Pillman entered a bizarre feud with Goldust, centered around Goldust's real-life wife, Marlena. After losing to Goldust at SummerSlam, Pillman was forced to wear a dress for a month. Then he upped the stakes. He'd win Marlena as his personal assistant if he beat Goldust, or leave the WWF if he lost. At In Your House Ground Zero, Pillman won. It was his final pay-per-view appearance before his tragic death. His last televised match came on Shotgun Saturday Night, where he beat the Patriot by disqualification just days before he passed away. And that wraps up today's video. You know the drill. Don't forget to like, drop a comment, and hit that subscribe button too.